In members of council, this meeting is resumed. Thank you. This meeting is now resumed. Before the recess, council was debating item EX 10.6 on a development charge complaint for 1251 Bridal Town Circle. So is it the wish of council that we complete that item before we get to the members' motions? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, thank you. So if we can put the names up on the screen, please. Councillor Wong Tam.
Oh, Madam Speaker, I was going to call the question. I'd still like to call the question. I will.
I don't need.
Councillor Fillion, did you need to speak?
Well, not if we're going to call the question.
Okay. So the question has been called. So we're voting on the item at executive committee. Oh, to end debate, yes. We're voting on to call the question. Recorded vote.
Councillor Pasternak, once you're seated, please.
Councillor Bradford, please.
The motion to call the question carries 18-6. The required two-thirds majority has been achieved.
On the item, recorded vote. The item, the executive committee. Yeah.
The item is adopted unanimously, 25 in favor.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now go to members' motions. MM 12.1. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Economic and Community Development Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item? All in favor? Carried. MM 12.2. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Economic and Community Development Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 12.3. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 12.4. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Recorded.
Counselor Karygiannis, please. Counselor Bradford.
The motion to waive referral does not carry. The vote is 15 to 10. The required two-thirds majority has not been achieved.
MM 12.5. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to reopening of item MM 11.11. A two-thirds vote is required to reopen that item. If reopened, the previous council decision remains in force unless council decides otherwise. All in favor? Okay, recorded.
Counselor Perruzza, please.
Counselor Bradford, please.
The motion to reopen carries 20 to 5.
Okay, on the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 12.6. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Recorded? Oh, hold? Okay. Yes? Pardon?
I have a minor amendment, and so if you want to put that up, we could vote on it now.
Does the staff have it?
Yep. So it's just adding another group to be consulted in the potential establishment of this working committee. Okay, I'll hold it.
Okay. We bought, yes, it's held in Councillor McKelvey's name. MM 12.7. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 12.8. Notice that this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion relates to an Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario hearing and has been deemed urgent. All in favor of waiving?
I think she spelled that wrong, just so she could say it that way.
Yeah, I know, that's
Man, that was awesome.
That's kind of like
Okay, so we'll correct your name. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 12.9. Notice that this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion relates to an Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario hearing and has been deemed urgent. All in favor of waiving referral? On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 12.10. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried.
Madam Speaker, I have an amendment that I can hold out and circulate so everyone can see it, but I trust be fast.
So you want to hold it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
We'll be done before 4.
Does the staff have your amendment, Councillor
They
Layton?
do. I could try to move it right now. It really just separates the two out. Staff wrote it to say, look at buildings that are currently in the development pipeline versus ones that are further ahead down the road.
Is everyone okay with that amendment? Okay, all in favor of the amendment? Carried. Item as amended? Oh, that's it. MM 1211. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to Toronto East York Community Council. 2/3 vote is required to waive referral. This motion relates to an Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario hearing and has been deemed urgent. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor?
You look
Carried.
concerned.
MM 1212. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A 2/3 vote is required to waive referral. All in favor, pardon? Recorded vote to waive referral? Okay, recorded vote.
Councillor Karygiannis, please. Councillor Bailao.
We already supported this last year. It's just. This is something we support anyway.
Councillor Bailao, please.
We have waived.
Mike's mic is on.
The motion to waive referral carries 19-6.
Okay, on the item, recorded vote.
The motion carries 20-5.
MM 1213. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the General Government and Licensing Committee. A 2/3 vote is required to waive referral. Councillor Cole, you would like to withdraw it? Okay, all in favor of withdrawing the motion? Carried. Thank you.
Legal technicality.
MM 1214. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A 2/3 vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. You want to record it? Recorded vote.
Councillor Karygiannis, please. Councillor McKelvey. Councillor Bailao, please. Councillor McKelvey, please. Councillor McKelvey, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 25 in favor.
MM 1215. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, on favor, carried. MM 1216. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion relates to a Toronto local appeal body hearing and has been deemed urgent. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1217. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to reopening of item T 8.11. A two-thirds vote is required to reopen that item. If reopened, oh, we already did that one. Okay, sorry. MM 1218. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the General Government and Licensing Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. Hold. Councillor Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, you'd like to hold it? MM 1219. Notice, what was that? No. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Cressy, please. Councillor McKelvey.
The item is adopted unanimously, 25 in favor.
MM 1220. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Economic and Community Development Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Recorded. To waive referral.
Councillor Layton, we're going to need your vote, please. Councillor Bradford. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Councillor Carroll, please, and Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Fletcher, you're not voting? Okay, I will. And then don't leave the floor, please.
The motion to waive referral carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
On the item, recorded.
Councillor McKelvey, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
MM 1221, notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Planning and Housing Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. Now, Councillor Cressy, I believe you have an amendment.
I had an amendment advance circulated. I'm happy to move it now and deal with it with a recorded vote.
Okay, if we can put it on the screen. Okay, did you want to record a vote? Recorded vote.
Counselor Fillion, please. Counselor Perruzza, please. Counselor Pasternak, please.
The motion carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
Okay. MM 1222. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1223. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion relates to Toronto Local Appeal Body hearing and has been deemed urgent. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Pardon? Recorded vote.
Councillor Bailao, please. Councillor Cressy, Councillor Layton.
Counselor Wong-Tam, please.
The item is adopted, 23 to 1.
MM 1224, notice of this motion has not been given. A two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the Scarborough Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, pardon? You would like to hold? Oh, recorded. Okay, recorded vote.
Councillor Ainsley and Councillor Bailao, please.
Counselor Perruzza, please.
And Councillor Karagianis, please.
The item is adopted, 23 to 1.
MM 1225. Notice if this motion has been given, a two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the Etobicoke York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, on favor, pardon? Recorded?
Counselor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Mallow and Councillor Karagianis, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
MM 1226, notice that this motion has not been given. A two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the Government and Licensing Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving? Pardon? Councillor
I'm going
Grimes?
to declare a conflict on this one as I own a transportation logistic company.
Okay. So all in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, recorded vote. On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
The item is adopted 23 to 1.
MM 1227, notice if this motion has not been given, a two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to reopening of item EC 8.5. A two-thirds vote is required to reopen that item. If reopened, the previous council decision remains in force unless council decides otherwise. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On reopening? On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1228. Councillor Layton?
I'd just like to ask, because there's an item currently in front of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee entitled Congestion Management Plan. And how is it that this item doesn't require a reopening of IE 9.6 or removal from committee, seizing from committee, or whatever the terminology is, given that it's asking to talk about the effectiveness of the plan? I would say also, though, just to make it easy on everyone, that this congestion management plan update was deferred at the last Infrastructure and Environment meeting, so it's coming back December 6th, just a couple days from now anyhow. So it may not be an... Okay. Okay.
It's being withdrawn. Mike's mic is on.
Do we want to hold the item down? Okay. MM 1229. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agenda before council for debate. On the item, all in favor? Recorded?
Councillor Pasternak, please.
Councillor Karygiannis, please.
The item is adopted 23 to 1.
MM 1230. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agenda before council for debate. On the item, did you want a recorded vote, Councillor Thompson? Pardon? Oh, is it, you have an amendment? Okay.
Basically a discussion with staff, and because of our relationship with the photo laureate, we have to engage, and the other component part of it is simply work with EDC, which was what we were hoping to do anyway. So we're just replacing the a request to the city manager to EDC staff. I'd like to.
Okay, so it's on the screen. On favor? Recorded. What about the amendment? All in favor? Carried. On the item, recorded vote as amended. Councillor Matlow, we're in the middle of a vote.
The item is amended, carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
And ma'am, 1231. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is subject to reopening of item SC 7.22. A two-thirds vote is required to reopen that item. If reopened, the previous council decision remains in place unless council decides otherwise. All in favor, reopening? Carried. All in favor? Carried. MM 1232. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agenda before council for debate. On the item, recorded vote.
Councillors Bradford, Holiday, Matlow, please.
Councillor Grimes, please. And Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
Councillor Matlow.
The item is adopted, 24 to 1.
Okay. Do we want to, Councillor Pasternak? We held down on behalf, Councillor Robinson, NY 10.1. We do have the report. Did you just want to move it?
To release it. I'd be happy to move it if that's the direction of Councillor Robinson.
Well, we were waiting for the supplementary report, and I believe we have it.
They're both, yes, so if that's the case, then I'd be happy to move it on her behalf.
Okay, on favor? Carried. Oh, hold on. Okay, sorry. Okay. Counselor Pasternak. Counselor Pasternak.
Yes.
So on 10.1, so you move it?
Yes.
Display it?
So the instructions I received this morning was upon receipt of the supplementary reports to move it on behalf of Councillor Robinson. If anything has changed in between, I'm not aware of it. I can,
On favor? Carried. And then NY 10.2? Counselor Pasternak?
Laird and Focus?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to move it on Councillor Robinson's behalf.
On favor? It's on the screen. On favor? Carried. Item as amended. On favor? Carried. Okay, next item is page 3, Special Committee on Governance, GB 5.1. Do we have questions? I know everybody's talking. We're on Special Committee on Governance now. GB 5.1. Questions, Councillor Perks.
I'll just give, I don't think all the staff are in there. Oh, they're settling in. If you just wait until, Speaker, if you could just wait until people have been able to get into there. Speaker, the staffers just settling in. Could you wait to start my time until they're there? Thank you.
I stopped your time.
Thank you. Thank you. So maybe Councillor Perruzza, I know that, you know,
Councillor. Councillor Matlow, Councillor Fletcher. Well, Councillor Perks is trying to ask a question and it's very noisy. Okay, let's start with questions. Councillor Perks.
Thank you. So the item we have in front of us is came as a result of a staff report which tried to summarize the consultations that we've done to date and some of the things you've heard, and advise that some further work be done, but not directing us to do a whole lot of actions except something around the Committee of Adjustment and one or two other things. Is that sort of a fair summary of why we got here?
Yes, Councillor, that's correct. The motion with regards to the Committee of Adjustment was on request of the committee that we include that in the final report.
Right. And can you just refresh my memory? How many members of the public directly participated in any of the consultations that you did?
Thank you, Councillor. We heard from 39 public speakers at the committee. We received 50 submissions. Sorry, the clerks received 50 submissions. We received an additional 107 input from 82 neighbourhood associations and a completion of 570 surveys. We also had participants attend public sessions that we held across the city.
Right. And a great many of the communications that we got, especially in that last meeting, were encouraging us to further investigate some of the options that we'd considered. Not to just put them off, but rather to do a more intensive look at some of the potential ways of changing our governance. That was an awful lot of the commentary we got at that last meeting, wasn't it?
Yes, Councillor, that's correct.
So as a result of that, I asked city staff, yourself and others,
Madam Speaker, I'm sorry, I cannot hear the item. I can't hear the person standing right behind me.
I'll speak louder. So as a result of that, I asked your office to undertake some work on what it would do to really robustly investigate those questions, to bring in expertise, to really communicate with Torontonians and get their advice. And for a total of, I think it's 6 different items, you suggested a figure of $3.3 million would be adequate. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor, with the caveat that if we were to bundle those or to scope them or needed to require purchase of new technology, for example, that number might change.
That number might change. But you didn't feel it would be possible to get really good investigation on any of those questions unless we put additional resources in.
So, Councillor, at the special committee, we actually heard from respondents that by focusing and narrowing any public engagement on any city issue, you are more likely to have participation levels that are higher.
So we would have got more participation, but the question I was trying to get to is the advice you gave me at committee was if you want to narrow in on these questions and really engage Torontonians, you can't do it for free. You have to spend this money.
That's correct. There would need to be an investment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I wonder, it's hard when you're actually asking the questions if you've got background noise. I wonder if we could ask this conversation be moved outside the council chamber.
I did, Councillor Carroll.
Could you please take it outside? It seems like a meaningful conversation to you. Please take it somewhere.
Councillor Matlow. Okay.
I need to be able to hear.
Amber Alert test.
Really? I'm serious.
That wasn't me. That was
No, I'm not. I don't mean the Amber Alert, but I'm serious, Councillor Perruzza. I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, because I've broken the chain. I should be addressing another councillor through you. I just want to be able to hear myself think. So, my questions. My questions are on motions that I moved at special governance that failed on ties, and I will be placing them here again. I think a lot of councillors know that. They're in the minutes. So I just wanted to ask some questions on them because they're things that community members brought, those 39 deputations. What percentage of them, I think it's highlighted in the report, people came because we asked them what would they like the committee to look at, and a certain percentage asked us to look into matters of election reform. That sort of settled in that category.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm sorry, I can't find that percentage, but I did know that of the emails that we received, a large majority of them were related to electoral reform.
But that was sort of difficult in the confines. We limited ourselves to a certain number of meetings, and a certain number of things really had to be dealt with on an urgent basis. So, while we got a lot of requests to look at those things in depth, is it fair to say we haven't really given you the amount of time or resources you would need to answer those requests?
Through the chair, there were a wide range of themes that came forward, and it would take additional engagement to be able to delve into deeper on any one of those topics, including electoral reform.
I have some process motions I'll be moving in, but the ones that are to do with election reform, campaign finance reform, can we categorize these? There is the oft-spoken about rank balloting issue, and the motion on that one is a little unique because we do, clarify, we do have the legislative authority to decide whether or not we want to do that, as long as we follow their process. Is that the case?
Through the Speaker, that's correct, Councillor. The Municipal Elections Act provides Council with an option to pass a bylaw authorizing ranked choice elections as long as they follow a two-step process that's set out in the regulation. And Council needs to authorize that bylaw by May 1st, the year before the general elections. That would be May 1st of 2021.
And we do have to consult. We can't decide today and we're done.
So the two-step process that's laid out in statute requires Council, prior to considering and passing a bylaw, to undertake public education and consultation, which at a minimum requires one public open house and one statutory public meeting. and also requires council to consider the costs to the municipality to implement ranked choice, the technology, and if we have the technology in order to do it, and the impact on election administration.
So the consultation and those costs mean the decision to change would be eyes wide open for the community and also eyes wide open for council.
That's correct. I think that's the intent of the two-step process, that you have the appropriate information before you pass a bylaw authorizing ranked choice for the next general election.
And with respect to campaign finance reform, I spoke about it at the committee. Some may know or have read the material I wrote on it, that I'm a fan of the New York City grant model as opposed to the rebate model, but with similar ratios of public money to donor money. That one is different. We don't have the legislative authority to do that, nor is there a clear process from the legislature. Am I putting that right?
So through the Speaker, that's correct, Councillor. Currently, the Municipal Elections Act does set out a campaign finance framework. It also provides Council the ability to pass a bylaw requiring a contribution rebate program. We do not currently have the authority to implement a New York-style grant program, as I understand the parameters of it. So we would need legislative change in order to consider that for Toronto.
So last question, Madam Speaker. If we wanted that legislative change, if we wanted to make financing campaigns more community-based, more grassroots, more accountable, so we wanted to make a change, is it fair to say we need to make the business case, write a report that is the business case for it, and send that to the province with the request, rather than just send a request saying we know about this thing and we want to change. Can we please have your approval up front? We're better off developing the business case here in this hall, are we not, before sending the request to the province?
Through the Speaker, in all honesty, Councillor, I'm a little bit of two minds on that matter. I think that at times it may be better to signal to the province that there is some legislative change that we may be looking for, to see if there is an appetite or some level of support for that kind of intergovernmental advocacy or legislative amendments. But I do agree with you, they can't really change the legislation unless they understood the parameters of a program that we would be looking for.
Thank you. Councillor Ainsley, questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just trying to understand in terms of governance, for our agencies, boards, and commissions, we appoint citizen members, and I understand for the majority of them, they have a two-term limit, 8 years, and a city councillor, for example, library board, it's a two-term limit for citizen appointees. Councillors can keep getting reappointed as long as they can get reelected and they get reappointed. I'm just trying to understand the rationale behind that structure.
Yes, Councillor. Often in midterm, there's realignment, redistribution of members to bodies, including agencies and boards. And for the citizens' public appointment process, I don't know if there's here someone from public appointment to speak to that, but the process is to secure the members for the term of council.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm trying to understand why that, and why we wouldn't have the same term limits for councillors as citizen appointees.
I'm sorry, Councillor. I'm struggling to answer the question. I know I have some information here. If we could just hold it for a moment, then I can respond to it in a moment. That's all right.
Sure. I'm holding your time, Councillor Ainsley.
No problem.
I do. I have it here with me. Sorry.
Deputy Speaker, if you want to hold mine down and let somebody else go.
I think we just about have a solution.
I'm so sorry. I know that John Elvich would happy to respond as well. When we did look at this, we did look at other jurisdictions, and it was standard across other jurisdictions to have this review, partially to include other perspectives, but of course it is up to council to make a determination about the length of those terms, and they can change it as they see fit.
Okay.
Mr.
thank you.
Elbridge, you had some follow-up? That covers it? Okay, and those are your questions, Councillor
My
Ainsley? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry. One second. Councillor Fletcher is next to question. Questions to staff?
Thank you. I just want to ask clerk staff that that if we move forward, I think we have a pre-circulated motion about the rank balloting. That would be we're assuming that's on 25, but we're not really sure until the Supreme Court hears the case for Bill 5 if we'll be 25 members or 47 members or some other number. Am I right?
So I'm going to ask the city solicitor to respond to that question.
That's correct.
Oh, sorry, I can't see through you, Councillor Matlow.
Okay, councillors, there's a real problem hearing in the chamber this afternoon. Not sure why. I'm not sure what we had for lunch. But if we could be courteous during questions of staff. And staff, if you could belt it out, please. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. And this would be a pretty significant change in voting for the City of Toronto, correct?
Through the Speaker, that is correct, Councillor. Implementing ranked ballot elections in an election the size and complexity of Toronto would be a very complex undertaking and would require a lot of change to our ballot, our technology processes, our voting place procedures, and a whole bunch of other election administration details.
And you also would have access so that we could see from the London election, as you could be in touch with that clerk to find out how easy, what pitfalls there might be, what we need to look for, the ballot look like, any enhancements, those kinds of things would be possible for you to report back on those things. Is that right?
Through the Speaker, we have been in contact with London just out of interest in our own sort of continuous improvement. We did look at London's experience with ranked choice. They were the first in Ontario. We have some high-level information from London. We are aware of some of the challenges they faced, but certainly if we had a direction to implement ranked choice, we would get a lot more detail from London's experience and try and learn from some of the best practices that they developed in that process.
And how many ranked choices are recognized? There's a number of them, are there not? Different types of ranking, ways to do it, I guess, operations.
That's correct, Councillor. So the Municipal Elections Act provides two types of elimination methods that the clerk needs to determine by December 31st, 2021, and that includes a single or a batch elimination method.
Can you describe those for me, please?
Certainly, I will do my best, Councillor.
2 minutes left.
So, single elimination method is the candidate with the lowest number of votes is eliminated, and the votes of eliminated candidates are then distributed to the remaining candidates according to the next preference shown on each ballot.
And that cascades up?
That's correct.
What's that called?
It's called a single elimination method. And then the batch elimination method is that all candidates who do not have a mathematical chance of being elected are eliminated at the same time, and votes of eliminated candidates are distributed to the remaining candidates according to next preference shown on each ballot.
So just following, thank you, that was even fast to explain that. But one of the reasons, and it sounds like one of them might be more complicated, but more democratic, because every vote is going to count as it cascades upward. One of the things we're at the Supreme Court, and our case is that the right of electors to fair representation, correct? Do we have a duty in looking at these that we would look at both of those methods to make sure that
I'm going to throw that question to the solicitor, given it's around the Supreme Court case.
Through you, Madam Speaker, yes, that is one of the issues before the Supreme Court of Canada, and yes, we would want to consider that when determining how best to move
So
forward.
you'd be giving advice to the clerk based on, we wouldn't want to do something that would harm our case that's at the Supreme Court. So it would have to be aligned
Yes,
as
through you,
far
Madam
as the method of voting would be
We would
concerned.
ensure that nothing that was done would undermine our case, yes. We'd
And
provide that advice.
I'm assuming, somebody would tell me that maximum democracy, the reason we would change is for maximum democracy, and we'd be reviewing all of the methods to see which is truly the most democratic method.
That's correct, Councillor. And I mean, we have had some very preliminary conversations in our office around whether we would want to look at a single or a batch methodology. I think from a transparency perspective, you know, our initial impression would be to look to a single. London actually did batch elimination, and the comment that I understand that the Clerk of London made after their election was she would have preferred to have done a single.
And because
it's more transparent.
More transparent, more democratic, even though it's probably a little more
Time-consuming.
Time-consuming and cumbersome. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher, to clarify, you mentioned the motion, you think it's circulated?
Oh, it's not
It
circulated.
in fact hasn't, so I've asked that my name's early on the speakers list, so it will be circulated as soon as possible. So we're just a little bit more in terms of questions of staff. Councillor Holliday to question staff.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Through you to staff, I wondered if somebody could recap quickly what the original ask of the committee was. What did council tell the committee to go look at, and what did you support us over the last year to do? And you can even paraphrase it if you wish, if it was along the lines of evaluating.
Through the Speaker, the mandate of the committee was to review the impact of the reduction in the size of council on our governance system and the model that we had adopted in December in CC 1.1, and to come back with any recommendations for additional changes to that model.
To the model. Okay. And so we did a whole bunch of consultations throughout the last year. And I'm going to say consultation is broad. We had evening sessions. There's a website. People wrote in. People came to several committee meetings. People made presentations. Fair to say we had a lot of consultation over the last year. And could you tell me, of all the things that people told us, were there a lot of problems that were raised, or were there a lot of solutions that were brought to us? And what I'm getting at is there was several prescriptive pieces of advice that came through the consultations. Is that a fair observation?
Yes, it is, Councillor. There was a limited number of key themes that did emerge, and people had solutions in mind. We did, on direction of the committee, push to understand what was behind those solutions, what was the problem we were trying to fix.
Did we get any sort of resounding problems that came out versus a lot of people with some really interesting ideas that they may have had for solutions that might be what they want to see in Toronto's government?
So that we found two major things. One was very, very few people spoke to the structures of our governance system, the standing committees and the community council boundaries and so on. Very few people spoke to those. And many spoke to issues that have been kind of ongoing issues with regards to, for example, public engagement with the city that preceded the committee's work and continue on as well. Additionally, things like how neighborhoods and neighborhood associations work with the city, and so those were all mentioned as kind of the ideas that came forward from participants.
Okay, so but you mentioned earlier, it's in the report, a lot of people wrote in about ranked ballots. It was the vast dominant theme on the email submissions. Can you tell me, though, what was the problem that people were bringing up related to elections? I know there's lots of solutions, and ranked ballot was one of them, but what was the problem? Or was there a problem identified?
I think across all of the suggestions or ideas or comments about electoral reform were issues of representation, opportunities to engage the public in voting, and increasing participation at the local level in decision making.
Was it fair to say that
Councillor Holliday, just 1 second. I'm just going to ask one more time, if people want to have really in-depth conversations, that they move them outside of the circle. Councillor Fillion, Councillor Perruzza, I'm really begging now, if people could take the conversation outside the circle. I'm having trouble hearing Councillor Holyday and the answers to his questions. Thank you.
Is it fair to say that, that civic engagement, people connecting with their government, being face-to-face with their councillors, was a problem that was laid out, as opposed to a solution?
That is correct, Councillor. I think across every single comment, regardless of whether it was a solution or had to do with electoral reform or about neighbourhoods and so on, it was about feeling a connection to their local government and to their local decision making.
Okay. On to the side of ranked balloting, can someone tell me what was the maximum number of mayoralty candidates that we had at any given time, and maximum number of councillor candidates at any given time? Even an approximate guess would be fine. Speaker, I wonder if you could just hold me for a sec there.
Yeah, I got it.
Give him a chance to.
So through the Speaker, in 2014, we had 65 mayoral candidates, and in 2018, we had 35 mayoral candidates. I'm going to guess at the councillor number. I don't have that.
22, I think, in 2014, and one of those.
I think 22 councillor?
15 and 20.
So I think there was about
Thank you.
20 councillor candidates in 2014. That doesn't make any sense.
Fair enough. So 60-something and 20-something, and I believe you. In terms of connecting with people and encouraging people to go out to vote, any guesses if we handed somebody a deck of a ballot that said, out of these 60 names, they're going to be listed 3 times, pick number 1, pick number 2, and pick number 3. On the next few pages, pick your first counselor, pick your second counselor, pick your third counselor, and by the way, on the back, choose the one school board person that you like. Do you think we're going to have a change management problem? Do you think we're going to engage people? We're going to make them feel connected with City Hall by creating such a very detailed ask at the voting booth?
So through the Speaker, certainly, Councillor, we are concerned about the challenge of designing a ballot that would be accessible given the number of rankings, and that we actually are using 2 different voting methodologies, ranked choice for mayor and councillor and first past the post for our school trustees. The ballot will need to be incredibly long, probably longer than a 19-inch, which I think is the maximum we've used to date, and
Okay.
we may have to contemplate 2 separate ballots. I think from our perspective, we would need to do a lot more public education and outreach and communication, particularly with communities that may have barriers to voting, to ensure that they understand how to cast their ballot appropriately. We'd also probably need to staff our voting places with more voting place staff so that electors have the opportunity when they attend a voting place to have the ballot explained to them in detail to ensure they can fill it out correctly.
Anyone familiar?
So that'll have to be your last question. I've given you quite a bit of extra time.
That one or this one?
Well, this one, because at one point
Okay.
I stopped the clock for you because of your colleagues,
this
so
one's a-
you're really over now.
This one's a real easy one. Under general idea of change management theory and barriers to change management, would anyone agree that undue complexity is one of them? Just a general question.
Certainly, undue complexity is an issue with managing change effectively, but I would suggest that given our last summer's experience, I think that if you have good project management, it can be overcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. Councillor Thompson, just before you start, joining us in the chamber is a delegation from Seneca College. They are working, a very global group, working with the Institute of Secretarial Training and Management, Government of India, and they're providing a 1-week training program for the Central Secretariat Stenographer Service Officers of the Government of India, and they're here to observe and explore emerging trends in technology and that are used in the provision of high-level customer-centric service delivery. While at City Hall, they'll be attending a workshop called My Local Government, It's For Me. And I just wanted to welcome them to the Chamber. Seneca College is in the ward that I represent, and also to let you know you have a treat. Based on what we went through because of some legislative change in the summer, There is no debate anywhere in the country of Canada that we have, in fact, the most nimble and high-performing clerks in the country for any municipality. Having survived Bill 5, Central Table are the heroes. Welcome. So, Councillor Thompson, you had questions of staff?
I do, Madam Deputy Speaker, through you to staff. The governance structure and governance committee that we have struck, that's ad hoc as opposed to a committee that is a standing committee of council?
Councillor, the Special Committee on Governance was established as a time-limited special committee of council.
So ad hoc?
It's actually established to meet on a regular cycle and to finish its mandate when it reports to council.
Ad hoc?
Ad hoc would mean that it could be called on by the chair at any time.
Okay.
The mandate is a little bit more specific.
Right, and I'm glad you answered that because that's really what the distinction I wanted to have in terms of understanding. And so our history has always been that we were able to convene that committee when needed. Is that correct? The governance committee?
The Special Committee on Governance actually had a scheduled a number of meetings that were published ahead of time in the council calendar.
Okay, thank you. Can you help me to understand this ranked ballot system that's, I guess, that you've indicated that there are several, but we have this concern with respect to the diversity of council. We wanted to expand that. If we were to implement such a system, would that get us closer to expanding our diversity in this chamber?
Through the Speaker, so, Councillor, in all honesty, I believe the research on the policy electoral impacts of using ranked choice in jurisdictions across the globe, predominantly in the U.S., has been somewhat mixed. I think that the policy rationale that sort of underpins ranked choice is that it reduces incumbent advantage. It is intended to increase diversity, but I will suggest that that hasn't always been the case.
There's no guarantee with respect to that, because I hear from people who talk about this, those are some of the things that they're trying to address.
And it wasn't London's experience, so, you know, I think the jury's still out. I think it really does depend. I think there's a lot of factors that come into that.
Right, right. Will we see more people coming out to vote as part of a process that would, if we were to change to this rank system, would more people be coming out to vote? Because I hear people talk about fairness and democracy and greater representation and so on. What are some of the challenges for people that why they don't actually come out to vote? Have you looked at that as an issue?
So, through the Speaker, the clerk is an impartial, independent election administrator. We do our best through public education, information, and outreach to encourage people to vote. We certainly don't have a role in getting out the vote.
That wasn't my question. In essence, that's what I'm trying to get at, because we understand that there's a problem. You talk about what the clerk does in terms of communication. I presume, understanding what the problem is, you would offer, through the process, solutions or ideas in terms of how to attract or get more people to participate in democracy, as been expressed. Are you doing that work?
So we do that. We develop and implement a wide variety of alternative voting methods to ensure that people are able to participate in the electoral process. We did a home visit program for the first time in 2018 to ensure that homebound electors had the ability to vote. We do curbside voting, we do proxy voting, so we've got a whole range of alternative voting methods that we try to utilize to encourage people to come out and cast their ballot.
Right. And I'm not sure if this is a fair question, but I'm going to throw it out there anyways. So we have a system, and naturally we want to change it because we don't think it works, and that's generally the flavor in terms of how people see this. You're not suggesting that based on the experience with the work and the other jurisdictions that you've spoken with, that you actually have an absolute system that works perfectly to address the issue around democracy, fairness, equal representation? Are you suggesting that ranked ballot will give us that sanctity of understanding?
Through the Speaker, Councillor, it's very difficult. Again, the clerk is an election administrator that really needs to maintain impartiality in the election process, and I'm not sure it's up to us in that role to comment on the efficiency or positive policy implications of moving to ranked choice.
Well, I would assume that you're doing some work. You were going to give
that
what other
your time is
jurisdictions
up?
are actually doing. Well, the other speaker had 6 minutes. I don't know.
Well,
I thought I'd test myself there,
the other speaker, I was unable to pause the clock when it needed to be paused because
Okay,
I had
that's-
stopped
that's
the
fine.
proceedings.
If she could maybe
That was
answer
not
my
the
question,
case
that would
during
be
your
great.
5 minutes. Yes, she can answer,
Thank
but
you.
you have posed your last question.
I have. That was.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm happy to answer your question.
Yes.
I think the point I was trying to get at is the clerk absolutely looks at other jurisdictions for all sorts of electoral innovations, including ranked choice, and we believe that our role would be to provide the facts to council rather than preferred opinion.
Okay, councillors, that concludes the questions on the item. Councillor Matlow, you held the item, so you are the first speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I want to thank my friend, Deputy Mayor Holliday, for guiding the Governance Committee through their deliberations, and I know that it was a lot of time and very little extra pay, and I appreciate the work that he and the committee members have done. I just want to add my voice to a few things that I would like to see in the future, and I would like to see this discussion of governance continue, because, well, you know, that phase needed to respond to a very fast-moving reality that we were all sort of plopped into with respect to the changes in the election and the format of council. I still think that there's so much more that can be done. You know, I look to Councillor Carroll, for example. She has been a champion of ideas like reforming, along with Councillor Ainsley and others, reforming the way that we even have the elections themselves with ranked ballots and participatory budgeting. There have been a number of suggestions in the public about how do we better engage communities with a smaller council, whether it be community boards like we see in New York City, or even looking at the devolution of powers towards our community councils, so that we can, well, be an amalgamated city, look at some of the priorities and issues that face certain regions of our city, and then better engage local neighborhoods in those discussions to focus on some of those local priorities, and maybe a mix of that and participatory budgeting to boot. What I'm saying is, here's some blue sky. These are kind of creative, innovative, democracy-loving ideas that are not just ours alone, but many of them have been implemented with great success in cities around the world. Residents in our city want to be involved with this process. They want representative government, but they also want to have their voice heard and their ideas considered. And they want to be at the table, sometimes literally and sometimes figuratively, but they want to be part of this discussion. And I would submit that the outcome of this process didn't fully approach that priority as well as I think we should be doing. I believe that there are going to be motions from some of my colleagues today that will ask us not to solely reject the work that's been done, but really to look at what more can we do? How can we better improve our city? How can we better improve our model of government to reflect the priorities of our communities and the diversity of different priorities we have, geographically and otherwise? And then also add, I'm so proud of this council for supporting the report request that the city manager I know has been salivating to take on advancing the cause for a city charter. It's really exciting because we're looking internally about how to improve our internal systems, but also at the end of the day, how do we empower our city to be the level of local government that we want it to be able to get the results that our residents expect and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Councillor Holiday is next.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would wish to place a number of motions, if I can ask the clerks to put those on the screen. I've got copies here, and I'll see if I can paraphrase them. The first is to ask the city manager, in consultation with the clerk, to come back to the executive committee and report on a few things. The first is an expanded role of community council beyond what we do today in decision making. Also, increasing number of success factors for public engagement with council and committees through things like the plain one language summaries that we get with the Auditor General's reports. In one of the reports we saw at the committee, it did speak to that, about getting that information to citizens. Obviously, new technology and open data, more meeting locations and times, and other best practices that we can use to encourage more people to be better represented at these various committees. Looking at how we can support neighborhoods and neighborhood associations and how they work with government. And the last are ideas for participatory budgeting, or and I'll even go further to say other locally based processes that we can try to reconnect with our communities with. Motion B is a request to the Speaker, and that is to maintain a very strict definition of urgent business, ensuring that more information about motions without notice is provided to the members before they are introduced, and that those indicate very clearly why they are urgent, and giving consideration to sequencing notices of motion to later in the council agenda to make sure that we're dealing with urgent business first. Item C is to ask the city clerk to come to the executive committee to look at our procedural bylaw, but I'm going to be quite precise on this. It would be proposing a 2/3 majority to overturn a recommendation of an appointment. And we know that that has created a lot of discussion in here. And council should should agree, thank you, Councillor Parks. Council should agree that the right procedure on this, or the convention that we ought to use, is to simply refer the matter back with some instructions to help those bodies figure out what went amiss. And the last is to ask the city clerk in consultation with the city manager, and I think that might be reversed on that motion there. It's the city manager in consultation with the city clerk to report to the executive committee with some information on how to fully investigate Toronto's ability to change election vote counting for the purpose of increasing voter participation and increasing candidacy. I'd like to thank my colleagues and all of the staff that supported the process over the last year. I've been listening outside of the committee and in the committee. But what I brought up in questions were there was a lot of ideas that came forward. If we think back, the committee was originally created so that we had a chance to evaluate the decisions we made on the very first council meeting, where we set a structure in place. And I think most of us have realized that those were the right choices. But what happened at the committee was that vacuum got filled with a lot of people that came forward with a lot of ideas that I think many existed before the committee was struck and had a chance to come forward during the committee, and would have a chance to come forward outside the committee, because there's a number of standing committees that these ideas can come to. So my motions actually refer some of this work to those standing committees where that work belongs. And I tried to be balancing some of the things that I heard in the chamber, but I also tried to integrate the concepts of, what is the problem we're trying to fix with some of the solutions that have been proposed. And I'd be interested in hearing some more information from the city manager and the city clerk. But most importantly, I want to understand what the cost impacts are and what the rules are. What I do know is that we're probably not equipped to make some of these extremely critical and forever changing decisions at the drop of a motion on the council floor. So there is some truth that there is some reason to go further on some of the ideas. But I think that there are places that they could go to, like the executive committee, like any member can bring forward a letter to the executive committee and propose an item to be on the agenda. I think we can take some of the input of the public input process over the last year and bring those to the right committees to further discuss. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Fletcher?
I just want to establish, Councillor Holliday, that these are motions that you're bringing forward from your committee?
These are motions that I wrote. There are some motions that came forward from the committee.
Sorry, are these from the committee?
These are motions that I wrote.
So these are your motions, they're not
Correct.
committee motions.
The committee motions are already before us.
So you're adding motions
I am.
to the committee. You've just mentioned that you don't think things should be dropped onto the council floor. Do you not think you're dropping things onto the council floor? We don't even have a copy?
I think that those are requests to go back to other committees, and they are based on things that I've seen and heard on the council floor over the last year.
Yep, but you didn't take, did you take these to committee and they lost?
No,
So you didn't share these with your committee members?
I'm sharing them with council.
No, I'm asking if you shared them with your committee members, Councillor.
We didn't debate these at committee.
You did not share these motions at the committee. So these would be new even to your committee members. I just need the answer.
They are new to council because they're
Are
brand
they new to
motions.
council? Yes. Are they new to your committee members? Have they seen these before? Did you table these motions at the committee?
No.
No. So they're new to council. They're also new to all of your committee members. Would I be right to say that?
You know, they were not at committee. The records show that.
As the chair, is there a reason why you would not have brought forward motions you think are important to the committee that you chair, rather than bring one,
these were
two,
written very recently,
three,
Councillor.
Councillor
four new
Fletcher,
ones?
please allow the
No, I'm not
council
finished my question. I'm not finished my question.
Okay, go ahead.
The question was, did you not see fit to bring motions to your committee rather than drop 1, 2, 3, 4 separate motions here, which had no chance for your committee members who've been working on this for a while to consider them and give you advice?
So the committee work is done. It's now before council, and this is the opportunity to bring motions forward, and that's what I've done.
I'm asking, do you think that's a good governance practice to have a committee to deal with governance and then come here and add brand-new motions?
Councillor Fletcher.
I'm asking his opinion on governance.
Well, these
Can
are
you please
entirely.
ask Councillor Karygiannis to stop?
Okay, point of order, Councillor
Chair,
Karygiannis.
can you please let us know what the questions have to do with clarification of the motion? I don't think
Yes.
they do.
Exactly, I was just going to say that. Clarification of the motion, Councillor Fletcher.
Clarification of the motions which weren't done there, Speaker. That's my clarification. I'm asking him as chair of the committee. He is the committee chair.
So, as far as I know, these are in accordance with the procedural bylaw, and if Councillor Fletcher is proposing that we don't consider anything new coming out of a committee, boy, I'll tell you, all our council meetings going forward would be awful easy, because I could submit my votes in advance.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Your time's up. Councillor Fillion, clarification of the motions.
On the motion to do with the two-thirds on appointments, so Councillor Holliday, would you agree that the selection panels are appointed essentially by the powers that be?
I believe they're appointed by council one way or another.
Yes, but would you agree that the appointees generally reflect, you know, who's in power at the council in any given year?
I would only agree that these committees do their work. We see the appointments generally successful when they come to council, but what I would also agree is that I've seen some very bad arguments over the last few years at council over a last-minute attempt to change the name of an appointee, especially when members of council aren't part of that selection process.
How many people have been selected by one of the panels and rejected by council?
I'd have to look back in the records, but I can say that at least more than one in the time that I've been on council. And most egregiously, some of them names brought forward I'd never even seen or heard.
So one in the time that you've been on council compared to dozens and dozens.
One that I can remember. And so the proposal here is to do away with those very, very caustic discussions at council where there is an uprising and an objection to a name. And so rather than submitting a brand new name on the floor where other members of council don't have an opportunity to even understand who that person is or what their qualification is, that the best matter, of course, is to simply send it back to committee. The reason I proposed a supermajority was to recognize that maybe there are instances that we need to appoint somebody on the spot and that it was a higher test than just a simple majority of putting members at a disadvantage of having no knowledge of the participants of the process.
So would you agree that someone would a candidate would have to be pretty awful, or there would have to be new, quite disturbing new information come out for a majority of council to reject someone that had been appointed by a committee that generally reflects the prevailing view here? That, it would be in highly unusual circumstances that you would actually get more than 50% rejecting someone. Is that?
Well, I think if the information was made available candidly to council and to understand what the problem with the candidate is, that it wouldn't be a problem getting a supermajority. But the easiest thing to do if a problem was discovered is to send the matter back to the committee with some instructions to say why the current selection was inadequate, so that they can do their job and come back with a qualified candidate. The things that I can't explain, and the things that I've seen on the floor, is the substitution of a name for one candidate to another, and I haven't a clue who the second person is, because I'm not privy to that information.
Okay, Councillor Pillion, that was your last question. Councillor Carroll to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll go through the motions in the order in which clerks typed them up. Motion A is the motion about undertaking. Are they going to appear on the screen? I'm using my time, and there's no motion there. Motion A is the motion about ranked ballots. This appears differently than it appeared at the Committee on Governance. It now reflects the legislative process. You're not deciding today on ranked balloting. You are deciding whether or not to go through the consultative legislative process to create the report that might lead to that decision. The next motion, Madam Speaker, motion B. I'm having trouble hearing myself again.
Please, can I have some quiet? Okay, thank you.
Motion B is on talking about that beginning of the term long-term strategy conversation, where we would conduct a citywide large-scale public consultation to align the mayor's elected mandate, the strategic priorities built up to that point, and of course what we've heard from the community. Motion C. This is from the Gabe Eidelman report from the Monk School, Look at Municipalities. Motion C is an interesting one that came out of that report, which is to say that when the budget chief introduces his motion, he should introduce it at executive, with the mayor and executive members present, and then transmit it to budget, and we would do the reviews, take the deputations and the public's opinion. That was to underscore for people that this was meeting the strategic priorities of the mayor and that consultation, the previous motion. D is an annual review. This is a rolling annual review. We've long talked about this. I believe the CFO is already working on this, that we have a rolling annual review to make sure that our outside agencies, our local agencies, boards, corporations, and commissions are in line with our priorities, both financial and strategic, going forward, and that there needs to be a rolling review so that at least some of them each year are being looked at in close scrutiny in that regard. And E, if I could get E on the screen, I'm using my time here. Can I have motion E? My clock is going by and I'm not going to be able to speak to these. Thank you. This is about overhauling our engagement process, but I'm not proposing how. I'm saying that for once we should resource, we should know what the price tag is of doing a good job of that. And so this is to report back in the budget process, what would it cost to really do the type of engagement overhaul and analysis that staff would really like to do. And finally, F is the campaign finance reform piece. As in my questions I established with Ms. Murray, we can't do this legislatively, but we do need to create the business case for it. I am fond of the New York Campaign Finance Authority model. It is a grant as opposed to a rebate program. And the reason I'm fond of it is meeting with that campaign finance authority, I found 9 of the proudest staff members ever that they have created over time one of the most accountable and scandal-free campaign finance mechanisms going. And they're not the only city that uses it. I think we should look at it. There are others popping up, the voucher system in Seattle, etc. But the one I'm proposing is one on which there are mountains of data because it has existed now for a couple of decades. And so our staff could bring back a report on it, and we would decide then, not until then, whether or not we want to request that of the province. We would then make that decision in this chamber. Madam Speaker, I made a commitment to community members and to my own conscience that if we are going to have this new type of council where we have monster jurisdictions and high-stakes elections, not just in the seat of the mayor, but really now in every council seat, that in this awkward legislative regime, it's up to us to make it a fair and accountable system. Not people to tell us what is fair and accountable. We've got to do it. We've got to be the motivated people who want to make it fair. And I really do. I know this. I know that I have nothing to fear from making this a more fair and transparent and more accountably and transparently financed election season. I have nothing to fear if I'm doing a good job. If I am every day, day in and day out, serving constituents as hard as I can, having a team that responds to their every inquiry, then I have nothing to fear from making this a more fair election. Nor does any other councillor who is currently conversing and doing whatever it is they're doing in this chamber right now. If they're doing a good job once they leave this chamber and go back to their offices, there's nothing to fear in making a transparent election. In New York City, with all due respect and with the greatest of sympathy to both Councillor Karygiannis and to the clerk, and to any other time where there's been question about finances in this city, the system that I'm recommending we at least look at, those scenarios wouldn't happen.
Thank you, Councillor. You're way over time.
Thank you. I wish it hadn't taken so long for me to get through the reading of the motions, but I hope people will now read them.
We do have a question for you,
Thank you.
Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I don't have a copy of any of the motions before us, but I just wanted to verify the intention of I guess, the body of the motions. At the end of the day, Councillor, you are asking staff to further investigate and then to report back. None of this is about immediate implementation starting tomorrow. Is that correct?
Not a single one of them, because there were a couple of motions that in their original form when they went to committee, they seemed like some of the changes that Councillor Holyday is suggesting staff look at. I had ones that seemed to me so straightforward, I said we direct staff to do this from now on. But the city manager is already looking at some of these changes out of the same academic report I was looking at. And so referring them to the city manager for him to bring back a report about them makes the most sense. So none of them really means that council is changing the universe today. All of them mean that council knows they need to look at these things and is directing staff to do so.
And given the fact that the concept of ranked ballot is not necessarily new, and it's certainly not the first time before this chamber, you're simply asking staff to now drill a lot deeper, go into the mechanicals, the costs, and then to come back with a report, but only after going through public consultation. Is that correct?
Yes, and for me, it's not even about, you know, if they come back to me and say it gives X number of different types of candidates, you know, for me, those may or may not be effects. The data that exists right now that they might go looking for will tell you the jury is always going to be out on that. All sorts of factors impact the level of ethnicity, the variance of gender in any campaign. My main reason for looking at it is standing in a councillor campaign office in San Francisco and asking the councillor, do you like this? Yes. Do you love it? Absolutely. Why? Because when you want to be somewhere on that ballot, whether it's a first choice or a second choice or a third choice, what you can't do door after door after door is lie about everyone else on the ballot. If you want to be some choice, You can't make the election about lying. You have to make it about the issues at hand. We in this municipality, we have ballot issues in the mayor's campaign, but at the council level, it's just who can tell the most outrageous lie and who's got the best list. We ought to be able to talk about the issues in those 25 local campaigns as well. And in a ranked ballot scenario, you really have to.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And with respect to the motions that speak to the budgets, and I think it's about enhancing the budget process, the intention is to...
Okay, Councillor Wong Tam, I'm sorry, your time's up.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Holliday, clarification of the motion.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to go to F as the first one. Through you to Councillor Carroll, I wondered if it was the councillor's intent to bring this matter back to the Special Committee on Governance. And it's a narrowed matter. It's a discussion about the New York City Finance Authority model. And I wondered if it was more appropriately brought to a different committee.
Well, the reason that I'm suggesting we bring it there is this is something that I know that there are members of the community have long wanted us to look at. I'm not the only one that thinks it would be a good fit for our municipality. And I suspect there will be a lot of people who will want to comment on it, speak to it. And I have no wish to derail the important work of the Executive Committee. And that's why I support what some have said about the Special Committee on Governance continuing to exist only at the call of the chair, being you, so that once this report is created, there's a place to go where the community really can come and make comment on it, and we could dedicate ourselves to that. At your call, of course.
And other than receipt of the report, is there anything that you would expect that the committee could do? Because the committee has no power, but in contrast to other committees.
Well, the committee could direct the staff member who has delivered that report to them to report to executive, as she has done with her summary of findings and on here to council. And if we like it, we could ask her to do that. If we hate it, we could bury it right then and there. We will have that option if we create the report.
And, okay, so motion 2A talks about City Council initiating the process to pass a bylaw for a ranked ballot. Would that not be a fairly concrete direction to staff to go and put in time and resources to do all the work that's involved, knowing from what we heard from the city deputy city clerk was that it was at least 2 years worth of work, and I would imagine that's a fair amount of resources. That's a fairly direct request to get moving on it.
Well, I know that the only way that we can ever properly look at it is to kick in the legislative process, which requires them to write a report and publicly consult. And had we not received for the last 7 years constant requests from the community to please look at a ranked ballot proposal, and at one point even endorsed it as a council and then rescinded our endorsement, and the community continues to ask for it in pretty large numbers. If that were not the case, I would say, shall we kickstart the legislative process? But if the shall we means we need a report to know whether or not we want to, that is the legislative process. Have the report, have the consultation, and you make no decision about whether or not to adopt the bylaw until the last step. So I'm saying take the first steps. The last step will be later on.
Thank you. That was your last question.
I've always had one community member talk to me about
Councillor Pasternak, question?
Yes, thank you.
Clarification?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just,
Madam Speaker, I think Councillor Pasternak has the floor, but a councillor is trying to speak to him as he's trying to question me.
So in 2016, we did a review of ranked ballot. How often or how regular do you plan on doing these reviews? Staff time, our resources. We've got so many other priorities across the city. Staff have spoken. The reports are all there. Why do we have to go through this?
Councillor Pasternak, your question.
Why do you think it's worth all these resources to go through something that we went through 3 years ago?
Well, actually, in actual fact, Councillor, we have never done a review. If you're saying review, that we've never done. We had a motion that we would like it to be part of the MEA, and Council endorsed that. What came back to us in 2016 was a motion on a ballot question of whether or not we should have ranked balloting, period. It wasn't like this, a motion that says go through this legislative process and do the consultation and have a report with details about it. Councillor DiCiano brought a late night motion and we were yes or noing it. That's not a review. This we've never done. And I think legislators in Queen's Park were very smart. What they're saying is you really owe it to yourself to do all these steps before you yay or nay it. These steps are the review that we have never done. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Well, for a little more clarity, so I'm
yes, that's my goal, is to create clarity for you.
Yeah,
with a capital C.
So more clarity. So I'm reading these articles about ranked balloting. So I wanted to ask informed questions. I'll tell you something. It is complicated. It gives me a headache. In my ward, we have tens of thousands of people that don't speak a word of English. Across the city, there must be hundreds of thousands. They barely understand that we have to pour enormous resources into the current system.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
Into the current system. How on earth, based on what I've read, how on earth are you going to explain this process to hundreds of thousands of people who don't speak a word of English? It just looks like disenfranchisement.
Well, Councillor, I know of two ranked ballot situations where there are very diverse communities. San Francisco, not quite as diverse as Toronto, but diverse, and they have bailiwick area councillors, and they use ranked balloting, and people are quite fond of it. Many people who speak Hispanic languages as first language, and the newly diverse community that has come with the tech sector, and they managed to vote somehow in high turnout. The other place is Vancouver, the second most diverse place in Canada. And in Vancouver, where people speak all sorts of languages, they have the most complicated ballot of all. It's about this long, and they have to choose every one of their at-large council members. They have to choose a mayor and a trustee, and they have to pick a whole slate of councillors. And somehow, they do it every 4 years.
I think I can squeeze in one more question.
No, please don't.
Your time is up. Councillor Perks to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a motion. So this motion is the same motion verbatim that I moved at the Governance Committee. So that you know, the 7 categories that are described there for further work are the categories that City Staff report said needed further work. The amount of money that I am proposing to do that further work is the amount of money that City Staff, under questioning 5 minutes ago, said was necessary to do that further work. If we simply approve the motions that Councillor Holyday has put forward and the advice that came from committee, we will be infuriating the people who are following City Council's work on trying to rescope our governance after Doug Ford shrank the size of this council. I went to the meetings. I had meetings with my own residents' associations. I listened to the experts who came forward, and not a one of them said, why don't you tinker with your procedures bylaw and provide a little bit of support at the Committee of Adjustment and the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, and then everything is good. Nobody said that. At the beginning of this meeting, when he introduced this item, the chair of the committee thanked all of the experts who came forward and gave us advice. If he really wants to thank them, he will encourage all of you to support my motion, because they all said the problem is much deeper than just tinkering with your procedures bylaw. We have a real problem in the City of Toronto where people are becoming less and less engaged in the decisions we make here. You all know it and feel it. You all know representing 110,000 people means that you can't get to all the community meetings you used to get to, and things that really matter to Torontonians are not making their way to the local councillor. Increasingly, it's just city staff or the staff in the councillor's office who deal with the public. Increasingly, the magic of this level of government, its permeability, the ability for anyone who cares about the City of Toronto to speak to their local official on an issue that directly affects their life has been fundamentally eroded, and people are furious about it. The reason why I'm proposing doing this second, more detailed piece of work comes directly from some of the community members and academic experts who addressed us at the committee. They all said the initial round of consultations you did just was too ill-defined, and it served very well to generate a list of issues that we needed to work on, but without the more focused consultation, we wouldn't be able to get people's best advice on what to do about those issues. One of them literally said, you need to go back to the public with this issues list if you want to get good advice from the community. The way we've done it to date was inadequate. That's what the experts that Councillor Holyday thanked at the beginning of yesterday told us to do. That's what a coalition of pretty much all of the residents' associations in the City of Toronto have told us to do. The one thing that makes this government so much better than any other government in the country is that we have the scope and scale to make big and important decisions. We're bigger than half the provinces in terms of our population, but at the same time, we don't operate the way a province or federal government does, where everything happens behind the veil of cabinet secrecy. We have a magical, magical government here. Doug Ford did some serious harm to it by turning it into the one municipal government with the highest number of people represented by each elected official of any city in any democratic country in the world. He's created a tremendous challenge. And if we tell the community, well, you know, if we change the procedures bylaw around civic appointments, problem solved, we are insulting every single person we represent.
We do have a question for you, Councillor Holyday, clarification of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the member. I just wondered what the member was hoping to achieve by consulting and researching the function of city councillors and what delegations of duties need to occur.
So, I'm glad you asked. It was actually in the staff report. There's a whole section. This is the report that we reviewed at the committee that you chair. There was a whole section on how members of the public wanted to better think about what the role of the councillor was vis-a-vis dealing with the public, vis-a-vis our roles on various committees, boards, and agencies, whether there could be things like community boards that provided advice to us. There's a whole pile of work there that I can't give you the answer to right now because we haven't actually sat down with the public and asked them in a detailed and thoughtful way how they want to deal with this problem that they raised.
So do you think we should go down the path of delegating tasks and jobs and duties that councillors do to other people? Do we have too much work? Is that what it is? Or are there certain things that...
Councillor, I don't think you listened to me and I don't think you read the staff report. What I said at committee,
That's not quite fair.
Councillor Perks, please.
Okay, then I'll just explain why it is that I made that
But
statement.
obviously, he read the staff report. He's the chair.
Well, he's asking questions that would lead me to believe that he hasn't. I am not advocating a specific outcome here. What I explained at the committee when you asked me questions, what I explained in my speech at the committee, what I explained in my speech here, is that members of the public are saying to us they want to have a conversation about how this works. This is not proposing a conclusion. If I were simply doing as you've done with your motions, proposing a conclusion here today, then I could tell you what we should do. But my whole point, the thrust of everything I've said on this topic at committee and here, is that Torontonians are starved for a conversation with us about how the government operates. And let's go have that conversation.
And do you think Torontonians want us to delegate authorities, things that we do to other people, individuals?
Some do, some don't. Some would like to understand better what the options are before they make up their mind. That's why you consult people, Councillor.
Do you think a sustainable majority of the City of Toronto citizens want us to delegate the work that we do to another individual? And I don't mean some people that came to the committee. I mean
as
a real
the two
sustainable
academic experts who came and made representations to the committee at our second last meeting said, unless you narrow the question, you will not get good advice from the public. This narrows the question and says, go ask the public what they think. I'm not like you. I don't want to conclude ahead of time what we should do. The whole point of this is to ask the people we represent what kind of government they want.
Thank you. That was your last question. Councillor Bradford, question to Councillor Perks.
Thanks very much. These items here, A through G, was this based on the feedback that you heard at the special committee?
Yes. Let me explain how. The report we had before us, which has been transmitted here with this item, summarized the themes that we heard in the public consultation meetings, in the online consultation, and all the other things. So these categories are the categories that city staff said they heard from the public and which might merit further investigation.
So they're categories as opposed to, you see them as categories as opposed to specific things that we...
They were listed in the staff report that we're considering right now as categories for further investigation and thought. That's literally where I got these words.
There was discussion at the committee on term limits and as something that we could explore further, and that the committee made the decision that they weren't interested in hearing more about that. Would you be open to an amendment to this item to include that?
So there were a couple of different sets of motions that came. Mine reflected the stuff that was in the staff report. Councillor Carroll moved some motions on electoral reform, and if you think that we should be doing more work on electoral reform, it would be more proper to try to amend her motion than mine.
Thanks very much.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Cressy to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I regret to say that I believe that the committee did not fulfill its work and did not fulfill its mandate. And I regret to say that because I in no way want to disparage members of the committee who are colleagues and friends. But we are the largest city in this country, the 5th largest government in this country, the economic engine of this province and country, and we now have 25 councillors. And there is the expectation that all 25 of us can do the same thing we did before as local representatives and as regional legislators. The fundamental question that this committee had to answer and come back to us with options to consider is what is the role of a councillor under this model and how do we best govern in the interest of our residents? They didn't do it. So why are we sitting here at 4:10 in the afternoon debating dozens of motions that have been moved on the fly with the so-called island option to punt all this work to the executive committee? That is not how we govern in the city or how we should, and that is an abysmal response to what the province did to us. And so the governance of the city is a big issue that requires deep thought for the future of this city. It merits a deep dive into it. This has been done many times in the past, pre and post megacity. It should also be a unity moment where we come together as councillors across the political spectrum and across geography. It is not a moment where we abandon that duty, where we move motions on the fly as the chair of the committee, and where we punt it to a hand-picked executive.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. I too would just, while I give my thanks to the committee, to the councillors who sat on it, the staff who supported them, and in particular the residents who came out time and time again to these consultations, I think that this is a missed opportunity. With this imposed change to City Council, we undertook this committee process and this review of our governance as the opportunity for a new beginning. I don't know about you, but perhaps the newer councillors won't feel the same way, but if you had served the previous term and now serving in this term, you could see and you can feel the job has changed. Yes, it's more busy. There are more nights away from home. I picked up some geography with the tallest buildings in the country. And managing through that development process is very different than it was managing through a more mid-rise context. But it's different for the communities that we engage with. They don't have the same level of contact that they once did with us individually. I think that's the saddest part of these changes and the changes to the structure of council have had to me in my enjoyment of this job is the ability and the time that I was afforded to work with individuals, to work with community associations on solving problems, finding local solutions to these problems. And unfortunately, while we have staff members that can take on some of that responsibility, it just doesn't feel the same. So why should we expect the system to work the same? And that's why I thought we undertook this process with the best of intentions to actually go about giving this an opportunity to affect real change. And I heard from my residents and through some of the deliberations at the committee of some of that real change that people were hungry for. And change is hard. You all know that. You've dealt with speed bumps on streets and development files. Change is hard for our communities, maybe even harder for those that try to lead them. But it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And I think what we saw is we saw the committee go full circle, hear about many things many possibilities, but not landing on giving any instructions for how to move forward on any of them. And I look at these I know that it's improper to bring them through this forum as a bunch of different amendments, but I would have preferred to see it as part of a committee report because many of these, even from the chair, I could agree with. Many of them I find very innovative and stuff that I think we should continue consulting on. I'm going to just list a couple because I think they have real merit, and I hope you might consider supporting the continued work of this committee and staff along these ends. One is the grant campaign financing that Councillor Carroll put forward. This could fundamentally change and level the playing field for how people get elected in this city. To allow for individuals of different backgrounds, different capacities to actually run a resourced campaign and for our residents to hear a diversity of opinion. Another one is participatory budgeting, one that Councillor Carroll again has been a champion of for many years. And while that process might not work in all communities, it hasn't been tried in many. And the actual scale-up of that idea has yet to be attempted in Toronto. It's not for lack of Councillor Carroll's hard work and continued efforts to that end. Councillor Perks has brought forward a list of recommendations that involve actually funding things like an Office of Neighbourhoods to continue to push for permanent resident voting in the City of Toronto. These are all incredibly valuable things, and we shouldn't give up the opportunity to continue to look for the space that we can change as a city of how we operate to restore some of that connection that our residents have with the decision-making that happens in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Councillor Fillion is next to speak.
Thank you. So this could have been a great opportunity to open up decision-making to involve our communities to a greater extent, and I think it's largely been an opportunity lost. And democracy can be a messy thing. It's sometimes, tedious to sit through it. It's sometimes, not fun to watch it, but it's it's important to involve people and to go through the process. And what I've seen here steadily over the years is kind of efforts to sanitize that process, to abbreviate it, to centralize it, and we should have been doing the opposite here. So due to the lack of time, I'm just going to pick two issues where I think there's been an opportunity lost, certainly with ranked ballots, and we thanks to a motion from the floor, we do have a chance to address that, and we do need to confront that issue honestly and openly and honorably, and I think we don't have a great track record on that in the past, with people promising one thing leading up to a vote and then changing their votes when it actually comes up. There's a former councillor who I won't name, but who used to make it a practice to wait till the last minute every year to enter the race. And that would cause all kinds of people to think, oh, we've got a chance, there's no incumbent here. And don't make me laugh, Councillor Minimum. I'm sure there are many people who have done this. And all kinds of people would put their names on the ballot, and then the incumbent would jump in literally at the last moment, and then could get in with a smaller percentage of the vote. And if you don't have solid support from more than 50% of the electorate through a ranked ballot system, you really have no business being here. So, it's a pretty modest reform, and it's something we should be really seriously considering. So the other one that I'll just talk about is what the motion Councillor Holyday made about appointments. And I do think it's ironic and not at all favorable to have the chair of a committee that's supposed to be looking at opening up the process come in with a bunch of motions that haven't been to the committee. And I don't like to disparage Councillor Holyday, who I work with on another committee, and I consider him to be an outstanding chair, but that just shouldn't have happened here. Those motions should have gone to the committee. People should have been allowed to speak to them and consider them, and they should have been pulled apart and maybe ask for staff reports on them to go back there. So I won't be voting for any of those, but the one that really bothers me is the appointments one, that people would be appointed basically with a 1/3 vote here. It would take 2/3 for them not to be appointed if they were selected by a panel that, in that panel, we all know how that is created, and it's people who all think a certain way. And it's sort of fair that I think the four mayors we've had since amalgamation have all, to greater or lesser extents, wanted to populate the committees with people who generally have their agenda, want to advance their agenda, maybe share their view of the world. That's fair enough to some extent. Then you had the one extreme excess with Councillor Ford, and to the point where we had a report on that process and how rigged it was. We had entire previous bodies all had their heads chopped off. None of them were even considered for appointment, and it was an extreme case of cronyism and partisan appointments. And we need to be able to correct that kind of behavior, and it is very hard to get more than 50% in here to turn down an appointment, but we certainly need that opportunity in cases like what we frankly had during the 4 years, and I think we all know that existed. So I won't be voting for that one, and I'm hoping others will think similarly.
Thank you, Councillor Fillion. The next speaker is Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have a motion I'd like to move, an amendment. And it is just to replace on that motion of that Councillor Carroll, and I don't know, hold on. There we go. There's my mic on now, it's in front of me. To replace a special committee on governance with executive. I do feel that that is this motion. I'm not talking about the merits of this motion at all, but I think the proper direction for that to go is to executive, and I'll explain my rationale. First of all, I do want to thank the committee members. I do want to thank staff. I want to thank dozens, if not hundreds, of people who came out over the last year. I was one of the members of the committee along with the other ones. And I want to let everybody know that I wasn't asked to do this. I actually was asked, but I actually went to the mayor and said, I want to be on this committee. I recognize how important governance is to this institution and to really any institution. So when I knew after the changes that happened from the provincial government and the amalgamation, I felt it was critically important that I be involved in whatever format I could myself. So hence, I did actually want to be on this committee, and I want to thank the committee members, of course, for the work that they've done, committee, and as I said, everybody who was involved in that. But I do feel that the committee has come to the point, not saying that it's to end, because I think more work will be coming out of that, but it has met its mandate, and I will be supporting the recommendations that have come from staff on that. And let me explain a bit. When I'm looking at some of the comments that I've heard, Toronto is starved on governance. I've heard, democracy is in jeopardy, and we're at peril in some respects that if we do not continue this work, that we're going to be falling apart on the governance side. I don't believe that at all. We went through a drastic change a year ago, and I think we've come through that. There's been some bumps and bruises, but I think we've more or less come through that. And I could talk about what it's like, on the governance side with the changes. I do support the changes. I'm glad we made those changes, but I think when we're looking at do we need to continue with the Special Governance Committee, I don't feel that we do. And when you look at, and I look at the people and everyone who came out, again, from all across the city, I was there, I listened intently to them, but when you're looking at my ward that I represent, the vast, vast, vast majority of people in my ward didn't participate. Not because they necessarily didn't want to, but it could also be that they may felt that, the role that we're doing, the changes that were made were adequate. So when I look at them, I go, they didn't necessarily participate, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's my job. That's my role. I represent them. I should be putting my voice forward, as I did as a member of the committee. With regard to Councillor Carroll's motion, I will be supporting, other than the rank balloted one, which I am not in support of at all, I will be supporting hers. And in many ways, we sat there and we worked them up because the format of those motions was really to be reported out through executive. She agreed to that. She made the changes. I'm comfortable with that. Again, it wasn't necessarily what she was wanting to do, but I thought the best direction was to go to executive. We actually talked to the city manager, who agreed. And we worked on that. Maybe I didn't pick up on the last motion here to go to executive, and maybe that may have been my fault when she looked at it. But I just do feel, again, I'm not going to talk about the merits. In fact, I went to New York with the councillor, and you'll probably be seeing that on TV in February. So I'm not talking about the merits. In fact, I think when you look at the TV show that's coming out, anyway, we won't get into that. But it's not the merits. I think it needs to go to executive. So I want to commend her for doing that. Other than that, as I said, I very much support the committee and what they've done. But I do feel that the mandate now has come to the point where it needs to move on from the existing governance committee that we've done. Thank you.
Councillor Crawford, there is a question on your motion from Councillor Perks.
Yep. Thank you. And before I ask my question, please do let me know when you and Councillor Carroll are going to be on TV. That sounds like must-see TV. The question I have two. First, given that it is frequently the case that deputation times have to be shortened at executive because of the number of people who arrive, and it is also the case that we never once had to shorten deputation times at the Special Committee on Governance, don't you think that sending it there will reduce the amount of time that people have to share their thoughts with us?
Yeah, I'm on executive, Councillor, and you're there a lot too, and yes, that does happen. But again, I'm focusing on the merits of what the councillor has asked here. And as I said, this is something that I do feel needs to go to executive, not the special committee on governance. We have, other than this one particular
I do
item.
have a second question.
And I respect that. Other than, this this motion, the committee has met its mandate. Now I know we're gonna be voting on that aspect of that, but I feel it's met its mandate, and to continue the special committee on governance for this one particular item, I don't feel is warranted. I feel that this will get the kind of response and report at executive.
So my second question is, given that in order to make a deputation at the executive committee, you sometimes have to wait all day because you have to juggle a whole lot of different items with a lot of deputants, and we can't pre-schedule them. Quite frequently, and I've heard people say this to me, I went down to make a deputation at executive at 9:30, and I couldn't stay until 4 o'clock. Given that that never once happened at the special committee on governance, don't you think that you're not only reducing the time each deputant will have, but you're reducing the number of people who will be able to depute?
So, Councillor, what I would suggest, or what I will probably do, being a member of executive, when this report does come out, I'll speak with my colleagues to see if we can have this item as number one, so number one, people won't have to be waiting around till 4 o'clock. And you're going to have to wait and see what executive committee it comes to, because there are some that we do the 5 minutes. There are some that we give everybody that opportunity. It depends on which executive it comes to. And maybe when I'm seeing that this report is coming out, if we realize, as I recall the last executive was, unfortunately wasn't there, was not a heavy agenda. I know the agenda coming up in January is going to be crazy. So maybe when we realize when this report is coming out, we can ensure that it comes to an executive that may not have the kind of workload that would, in essence, push for a 3-minute opportunity to speak and ask questions.
I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Councillor Crawford, do you have another question from Councillor Holiday?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to explore further the reason of choosing the Committee of Executive over the special committee. Do you think that folks would be frustrated if they realize that a decision regarding campaign financing couldn't be made by the special committee on governance? So to come before elected officials and petition for a certain choice, it's not fruitful. It should go before the committee with the proper mandate.
Yeah, I agree with you, Councillor, that it needs to go to the proper committee.
Are you concerned that a group that's supposed to be focused on governance would break from governance and continue dialogue in a committee without power or authority over something like campaign financing?
Not necessarily, no.
And do you think the executive committee is the right place to consider such a question?
Yeah, I do. Being a member of executive over the last number of years, I do feel that is the committee that needs to go to. Plus, again, a lot of Councillor Carroll's motions. This motion that I'm looking at, yes, I do think that is the right format and format.
Are you confident that being at executive wouldn't prohibit anybody from making their views known, whether they come in person or whether they write a letter or have a group go on their behalf? Surely everyone else that goes to executive committee is being able to present to members of the executive with their concerns.
Well, from my experience sitting on an executive, a lot of people come out to depute, to speak to us, and we listen to them on those important issues. So no, I have no problem that people will not be hindered by any of this going to executive.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a couple of motions. One is that the City Council requests the City Clerk to look at all methods of ranked ballot election, assuming we pass Councillor Carroll's motion. And then I have a second one, which is amending Councillor Carroll to look at all the ballots. I'd ask the Clerk about that so we can actually see how they worked, and as well to have the A and B brought in subsequent to, I don't see, oh, I see, I'm just amending A and C, subsequent to A and B, that we would look at the bylaw. So really, at this point, I think that we're at that moment where we have to look at this and asking the clerk to do that would be very good. I don't think today that we're moving or working to moving or deciding or implementing a ranked ballot system. It's a very big move. I know some people would like us to do that today, but I think we are making a massive change to our voting system and would have to be extremely careful with very good advice and look at the implications for those cities, including London, which just did that, to see what kind of a difference that made and what was easy and what was hard, what happens to second language speakers. There's many different things that people would like to discuss. So what I would vote today is to basically follow a study process in which we would make a decision based on expert advice from around the world and expert advice from our clerk, financial advice, everything else. And I think if we don't do that, we're going to miss the mark because we've been asked so many times to do it. But I understand that this is asking us to consider a major change to how voting would take place, and we have to balance a whole number of interests in the City of Toronto. So that would be, I think, those two motions would be helpful. I will also just, a lot of things came to the Governance Committee. My understanding originally of the Governance Committee was because of the change to the 25 seats, et cetera, that we're having a different relationship, as Councillor Layton has said, with our electors. And as a matter of fact, we're at the Supreme Court about our relationship with our electors and our ability to fairly represent our electors, which is a fundamental under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that we need to be able to represent them. And I would just caution everyone to say that is at the Supreme Court. And our city solicitor advised us of that in my questions, that yes, that is our position regarding electors. We are at the Supreme Court. So everything that we do has to take that into account, including the fact that we might find ourselves back in a situation of an increased city council, depending upon what the Supreme Court says. And I'd like to make sure that all scenarios are being looked at while we're looking at changes in governance. The connection to electors is pretty important and fundamental. So I think that continuing this work to see how best to have that connection at a point where we don't have the time, actually. And I'll just talk about our Protection of Affordable Housing Subcommittee, which we actually held in the evening so people could come. We did change the time to 3 minutes, Councillor Perks, because we had 40-some deputants. But people were hungry to be able to come to see us. And I don't know how many of these motions were to at least have some of our community councils at night. There's no reason why they're always in the daytime, because many people can't get there. And maybe more community councils if we're trying to engage more often and in a deeper way so people understand how our city's working and what we're doing. I just want to take my last seconds to talk about member motions. There were changes not made by the Ford government in 2018. We had changes made in 2010, changes that meant that you couldn't move a motion at committee. Maybe some of you don't know, but in the past, I think at every single city council in every legacy city, you could go to a committee and you could move a motion if you weren't on that committee. That was stopped. That was stopped. You could ask questions of motions that were moved at a committee. That was stopped. You have to be a member of a committee in order to question somebody on the motion that they've introduced. I would say those are governance issues. I was hoping that would be looked at to overturn what I'm going to call anti-democratic practices that were introduced in 2010 and remain with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank everybody that's brought forward motions about electoral reform today, and I will be gladly supporting those on ranked ballots. And I just want to read something I read last night, which really explains why. It's a quote by Edward Louis. "Among those who have everything, politics changes almost nothing. What's strange is that they're the ones who engage in politics, though it has almost no effect on their lives. For the ruling class in general, politics is a question of aesthetics, a way of seeing themselves, of seeing the world, of constructing a personality. For us, it was life or death. The people that sit around this table are often the ones that come from more affluent families or that have the resources to get here. We need to make sure that those that are most needed to sit at this table, those that are working 2 jobs to get by, those that have long commutes, the single moms, that they have the ability to get here, to run in an election. And so electoral reform is so important. And I'm so happy to see that we're looking at electoral finance potentially here today as well. I'm most likely most at risk through the ranked ballot system in the next election. In 2014, I lost by 2.3% to an incumbent. In 2014, I lost by 2.3% to an incumbent. And in 2018, I won by just 0.5% to an incumbent. Incumbency is a huge challenge to overcome. And now our wards have more than 100,000 people. There's no party system. We need to be able to give the political science students that were here this week the hope that one day they could sit at this table. We need to be able to give the high school students whose commencements we attend the hope that they can one day sit at this table. And I want to be able to give my 12-year-old self back in an apartment building, in a rental apartment building that doesn't come from money, the ability to know that she can be here one day too. So if we don't do electoral reform, we're not going to be providing the opportunity for those people that most need to be seated at this table. We're not going to give them the hope that they can be here too. So that's why I'm really happy that we have these motions on electoral reform, and I look forward to supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last speaker is Mayor Tory.
No, Cole was on.
Pardon?
I just saw Councillor Cole.
No, his name is not there.
Yeah, he was there, just bounced off.
It was not.
It was, I saw it.
Okay, if you saw it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. It wasn't there, so I didn't see it. Councillor Cole.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to speak, but...
Well, you see, his name was not there.
No, I just wanted, on behalf of Councillor Peruzza, myself, and maybe others, I just wanted to put something on the record. And I know Councillor McKelvey, I really respect her, and she's got an amazing public service disposition that's beyond, assertive scrutiny. She's just excellent. But she just caught my attention about the people that serve here. I want to just remind people that some of us did not come from well-to-do families. Okay, I came as an immigrant. I was 5 years old. I came on a ship after the war with my mother and my sister. My father came before, worked as an agricultural worker. And then my father worked in a steel mill. My mother worked as a seamstress on Spadina. I worked since I was 9 years old. I shined shoes. I sold newspapers on King and Bay Street. So I just want to put that on the record, too, that some of us may have come from well-to-do families. I don't know who really has, but I know for Councillor Peruzza and myself, many of us got here through a lot of sacrifice that our parents made, and we don't want to forget them. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. You didn't mention my name, Councillor Cole. Councillor Peruzza.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you so much, Councillor Cole. I think he made that point. I just want to add another point and put it on the table. I'm a supporter of proportional representation. I'm a devout supporter of proportional representation. Because I think in a democratic system, the democratic institution should represent the population. I understand why we can't have proportional representation here. I get that. We don't run with parties. We don't have that system. I would also, and I agree with some of the others, I would also support runoffs. You want to get to 50% plus one? I agree with that. But I'll tell you why you're not going to go there, because you don't want that. The system you're contemplating I'll tell you what it does in a neighborhood like, especially the old ward that I used to represent, made up mostly of immigrants, very, very diverse ethnically. People don't get it. They don't know how to vote here. They don't. So what do we have to do every election? We reproduce the ballot, and I'll show it to you if you all want to see it. Election after election. Reproduce the ballot, a sample ballot, and then go around and saying, well, you can vote for 3, you can lay up 3 votes. Mayor, councillor, trustee, depending on what the ballot looks like. And it's complicated, and then people say, what, I can vote for you 3 times? No, you can't vote for me 3 times. No. You vote 1 mayor, 1 councillor, 1 trustee, your choices. And it's really, really complicated, and you don't get to very many people to explain it to them. And that's why a lot of folks are really intimidated, and that's why the old Ward 8 that I used to represent used to have such a very, very low voter turnout. Because it's complicated, and people are intimidated by it. You wanted to turn it into kind of like an election that's anti that? Do this. Add another layer or 2 of complication. Make the ballot a little longer. Add some more choices on there, 1, 2, 3, 4. You choose, pick and choose. That's not the way people pick ice cream. That's the way they choose politicians, a little like they pick ice cream. I like, give me the chocolate flavor. Pick chocolate flavor. It's not, oh, tell me all your choices, rank me your choices, give me chocolate, vanilla, lemon, banana, whatever, right? Like, which one should move in up on top of that? You do that, you disenfranchise those folks. You leave them, the very ones you profess to want to include, you leave behind in greater numbers. That's what you're going to do. So you might want to, it's a privilege, right? I wanted to quote, I think I pulled up Winston Churchill, because I wanted to be inspired earlier, and I lost him now, right? Because I read it to myself, and then I didn't. But you know what? It just came back up. Look at that, right? It's back up. Winston Churchill. Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world, in sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. Right? What's Sir Winston saying? Yeah, maybe there's a more perfect utopian system out there somewhere, but this is not it. This is not the one you're contemplating. Either go the full yard or stick to what you got, because it's not working so bad.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I rise as the only guy in this chamber that looks like me, I have to ask myself, how will what we're discussing here today reflect the diversity in this chamber to ensure that decisions are made in the best interest of the city, that ensures that those who feel disenfranchised from this environment are in fact brought into this environment through a process. I have long felt there is a need to really drill into the process and helping people to understand what our relevance to them are and how we really significantly help them on a daily basis. There are many people who are challenged in this city. We talk about gun crime, we talk about poverty. Will this new mechanism that we're talking about, will that alleviate poverty? Will that help to make many of the lives of the people that we want to make better than the system that we have now. I haven't arrived at that conclusion that suggests a yes. In fact, I'm having a hard time understanding how the people who are the majority, that is that diverse city that we laud all the time and talk about how wonderful it is and how we benefit from it, is those very people are not going to benefit from the changes that you're proposing here today. I'm not convinced. I don't know what the absolute full solution is. Is it that we allocate certain number of seats for a variety of different people who look a different way to reflect the interest, the input in this particular city? I don't know. That's not what we're talking about. So proportional representation, is this the panacea? Is this going to be the elixir of success and create this opportunity where input will be brought to this chamber? I don't see that here. I, like Councillor Cole and Peruzza and Speaker Nunziata and others in this chamber, have come from varying places around the world. I came from Jamaica as an 11, 12-year-old kid with a mother, a single mother. I'm here, this chamber. I put a lot of time and effort in as a young boy, understanding I had an interest in politics, done a lot of interesting things. I didn't get a lot of help in order to get here, but that's not really the point. We need to help more people in order to get here. That's not what we're really talking about. What we're talking about, supposedly, if you don't like number one, you vote that person third or two, or if you like one better, you have these choices in terms of selection. Is that going to make us any better? I don't think so. I think what's going to make us better, quite frankly, is to really get out there and engage more people in terms of understanding what they can do to make their communities better, how they can really be involved. And maybe what we really should be doing is allocating specific number of seats to reflect the diversity in this city. Maybe that's the conversation we'll be talking about. But that's not what we're talking about. Because you bring in proportional representation, it will still reflect the city as it is today. It's not going to change. There's other things that we're going to have to do in order to make those changes. But we're not having those conversations here today. Because we've had a few people over the years who come in and said, we think proportional representation will better reflect the diversity in this city. I haven't seen any evidence of that. We're not asking for any real study with respect to that. What we're talking about is simply that, oh, you're an incumbent, we want to make sure that you don't have an unfair advantage. I'm okay with that, right? But what mechanism can we utilize? Is this the proportional representation? Is that going to affect that? Is that going to bring more people that look like me or the other brown faces, that others that live in this city? No. I think the body will reflect what we see here today. So go ahead. Go for the proportional representation. Let's see the changes because you think it's going to affect the outcome differently. I disagree that it's going to do so. So I won't be supporting any of those motions today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more names. Mayor Tory to speak.
Well, thank you, Speaker. First of all, may I say thank you to the members of the committee for the work that they have done. And I think if we go back and remind ourselves of the principal purpose that we established the committee to perform, it was to take some changes that we'd been forced to make, and then some of which we then made ourselves. So we were forced to make the ones with regard to the size of the council, and then when we got back here, we were forced to make ourselves changes to the structure of the government here, and we wanted to make sure that that structure, since we had to do that fairly quickly, was working, and that there was a chance not only to have members of council advise us on that, but also to seek outside opinion on that. I think that the best way to go forward with a number of the ideas that Councillor Deputy Mayor Holliday himself puts in his motion, which I will support, is in the way that he suggests, which is to have it follow the path that is followed by many other initiatives of this kind and of equal or greater importance, but these are important, and to have those flow through what I see to be a very open process, notwithstanding the point that was made earlier by somebody that you might have times when the deputations are limited. We've had no shortage of people coming, and I'm delighted when they come, and I find their contributions to be very constructive and contributing to the debate we have, and I think that that will continue at the Executive Committee, as it does at the other committees, where people, I think, feel quite free to come and to express their views and to talk about things such as the ones that Councillor Deputy Mayor Holliday has put forward to be studied both by the city manager and the city staff, and then go through the executive committee and ultimately here to council. With respect to some of the other motions that have been put forward, I just wanted to register that I will be supporting the ranked ballot series of motions. I've supported them before. I support them for two reasons, and we're not here to debate the merits today. We're here to, if people approve these, commence a process that is a lengthy and complicated process in many respects, so it needs time. But I believe in short form that the reason that this should be proceeded with and have this work done is first because I think, notwithstanding, I understand what Deputy Mayor Councillor Thompson was saying, which is that it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a more diverse result and a more representative result for this council, but I think it gives us a fighting chance, more of a fighting chance than the present system seems to be doing, as evidenced by all of us, and I have to include myself, that are here today. But the second thing I think it will do, and Councillor Carroll I heard referring to this, I think it will, and I really, really, really hope, it doesn't matter how long I'm going to be around in this business, that it will change the tone and to some extent the substance of politics, because I think they are drifting, even in this country, in a very, very negative direction. And I think a ranked ballot, as Councillor Carroll put it so well, will put a discipline onto people to stick to the issues, as they would say, and have good, healthy debates, but they will not be as personal as things seem to be today. So I will be supporting that suite of motions. I will not be supporting, sort of good news and bad news for Councillor Carroll, I will not be supporting 2C, the one that has to do with the budget. I think the budget process, look, people can criticize the output of the budget. I would be more interested actually in, and I'm surprised we didn't see more hear from you with respect to through you, Madam Speaker, with respect to participatory budgets, because I'm actually a believer that we haven't done enough there, but I think having it go to the Executive Committee first and then back to the Budget Committee, to me, is not something that would be a positive development. With regard to that, so that's 2C, I would vote against. 2E, and it's really similar to the reason why I will also vote against Councillor Perk's motion here, number 3. I just think the notion that we're going to spend a lot of money or spend a lot of time having reports about, if you look at it, $3.3 million to fund consultation and research. I haven't had a single person, I have lots of people, I will concede, come up and tell me we should be spending or investing more in this or that, but not one person yet has come up and told me we should be allocating this kind of money to improve their access to city government. Now, it may be, and there are not too many people that see more people across the city than I do, and so I would just say that I just don't, people don't come up and talk to me about these things. Now, I know some people talk about them, but it's not a lot of people that are clamoring for us to do a lot of these kinds of things. So I'll be voting against those. But I think we actually have a real opportunity to carry forward the work of the Governance Committee through the Executive Committee and through the other committees with what is a very long list, if you take these motions that I think will get approved, some of them here, and that's a full menu of significant changes and initiatives to be undertaken through either the Executive Committee or the other committees. So it's not as if we're saying, that's it, we're not going to consider anything more. In fact, I'm saying, for one, I'm quite open to seeing these things and quite enthusiastic about seeing some of them considered in earnest through the system that we have today. So I guess it's on with the vote, and we'll see where we go from there. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, so there's, before we proceed, there's two members' motion that I would like to introduce. So give a chance for the staff to print them and circulate them. Okay, it's on the screen. It's to do with the Etobicoke Services for Seniors, 30 Rosemount. All in favor? Carried. Yes. And my next motion, protecting tenants from unfair rent increases. All in favor? Carried. So we'll have a 5-minute recess so members of council can have all their motions ready, and these motions could be circulated. Okay, so members, we're going to put the list on the screen on the order of the motions. Okay, members of council, the motions are on the screen. What happened? We just have to add one more on that list. Okay, there it is. All right, so the first motion, put it on the screen. Okay, recorded vote.
Councillor.
Councillor Perks, please.
The motion carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Okay. One B, it's on the screen.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please. Councillor Perruzza, please. Motion 1B carries 23-2.
Okay, motion 1C. Recorded vote.
Councillor Bradford, please.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Lai, Councillor Bailao, please.
And Councillor Pasternak, please.
Councillor Bradford.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 9-16.
1D. Recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Mallow, please.
The motion carries 18-7.
Okay, next motion. Five B.
The motion carries 21-4.
Okay, next one. Motion 2A as amended. 2A is amended.
Councillor Mallow, please. Councillor Mallow, please.
The motion carries 14-11.
Okay, next motion. Two B.
Councillor Ford, please, and Councillor Bailao.
Councillor Crawford, please. Councillor Perruzza. And Councillor Cole, please.
The motion carries 16 to 9.
Two C, recorded vote.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 9 to 16.
Okay. Two D, recorded vote.
Councillor Bradford.
The motion carries 23 to 2.
Two E, recorded vote.
Councillor Carroll, please.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 12 to 13.
Motion 4, recorded vote.
The motion carries 19 to 6.
Okay. Okay, motion 2F as amended. Yeah. Okay, recorded vote. This is as amended by motion 4.
Councillor Ainsley, please.
The motion carries 22 to 3.
Motion 3, recorded vote.
I think that much is clear.
Okay, Move to reopen, all in favor, carried. Okay, let's do it again. Motion 3. Motion 2, sorry, 2F as amended. 2F as amended. Recorded vote.
The motion carries 22-3.
Okay, the last one, if you can put it on the screen. Oh. Okay, motion 3, recorded vote.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
And Councillor Perruzza, please.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 8-17.
Okay. Motion 5A. Recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, your vote, please.
The motion carries 15-10.
Okay, item as amended, recorded vote.
Councillor Layton, please.
The item as amended carries 17-8.
Okay, so we'll continue, just one sec. Okay, Deputy Mayor Minna-Wong, you want to release?
So 12.18 vaping ads, I can release that?
Okay, all in favor? Recorded vote.
Oh, okay.
No. Okay, Councillor Holliday, you have a problem with it?
Technical.
The member's motion, 1218. Vaping. Can we put it on the screen? It was held down when we went through the member's motion. Okay, on favor? Recorded, sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Fletcher, I didn't hear you.
Number of yours, Jennifer?
Okay.
Did you hold it or did I? Yeah, go ahead. I'll let it go.
Councillor Thompson, please, and Councillor Layton.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 25 in favor.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, MM 1228.
1228, I've spoken to and showed Councillor Perks and Layton this motion. They're satisfied with this referral motion, which is, if they'll show, put it up on the screen.
Okay, so you're referring it. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so members' motion MM 1233, recorded vote. What? Councillor McKelvey, MM 12.6.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's a small amendment. Just adding that we also consult with the Toronto Island Advisory Committee.
Okay, on the amendment, all in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Okay, members' motion, MM 1233. Put on the screen, recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The motion carries 23 to 2.
Okay, MM 1234. All in favor? Carried. Okay, can I have the bills? Members, before I ask for motion to enact the general bills, may I have a motion regarding the consideration of submissions on zoning bylaw and official plan amendments? Councillor Karygiannis.
That the committee and council consider submissions in making a decision on zoning bylaw and official plan amendments.
All in favor? Carried. Pardon? Oh. Councillor Carroll. You have a motion to introduce certain bills.
Yes, two motions, Madam Speaker. The first one, that leave be granted to introduce Bill 1622.
Shall leave be granted to introduce these bills? Recorded vote.
Pardon? Oh.
Councillor Mallow, Councillor Karygiannis, Councillor Layton, please.
The motion to introduce the bills carries 23 to 1.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor Lai, Councillor Bailao, Councillor Layton, Councillor Matlow, please. Councillor Perks, please.
The motion to enact the bills carries 23 to 1.
Councillor Holliday, you have a motion regarding absentees.
I do thank you, Madam Speaker, that City Council excuse the absence of Councillor Jay Robinson from the November 26th and 27, 2019 City Council meeting.
All in favor, recorded vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
Councillor Matlow, please. Councillor Layton. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Mr. Bill, did you read it? Did you do it already?
The motion to authorize absences carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Councillor Carroll, I'm sorry, you have another motion?
No need to apologize, Madam Speaker. Once again, you have got us with your center table through this agenda under the 6 o'clock mark on day 2. Thank you so much. Last of the bills are that leave be granted to introduce bills 1582 to 1621, 1625 to 1630, and 1632 to 1646. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall leave be granted to introduce these bills? Recorded vote.
Councillor Bailao, please. Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ford. Councillor Ford, please.
The motion to introduce the bills carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor Bailao, Councillor Layton, Councillor Ford, please.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please. Councillor Fillion, please.
The motion to enact the bills carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Councillor Thompson, you have a motion to introduce the confirming bill?
I do with pleasure, Speaker, that leave be granted to introduce a bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council meeting 12 on November 26th and 27th, 2019.
Thank you. Shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? Recorded vote.
Councillor Bailao, Councillor McKelvey, please. Councillor
Hold on, we have one more vote.
Councillor
Councillor Crawford.
Thompson, please.
Sorry. Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
Councillor Thompson.
The motion to introduce the confirming bill carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor Bradford, please. Councillor Layton, Councillor Cressy, Councillor Bailao.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
The motion to enact the confirming bill carries 24 to 1.
Okay, thank you to staff and thank you to members of council. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.